Have you ever wondered if a country on the brink of total economic collapse could actually save itself? Well, right now in Argentina, one of the boldest economic experiments in modern history is unfolding. President Javier Milei, that's pronounced Milei, is using what he calls shock therapy to fix a broken nation. And the results so far? They are absolutely stunning. So, let's get into it.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at just how bad things were before Milei took over. Then, we'll dive into his radical plan, the chainsaw and the scalpel. After that, we'll see the incredible results, from the government's budget to the economy as a whole. And finally, we'll talk about why this matters to all of us. All right, so for decades, Argentina has been the poster child for economic mismanagement. But now it's turned into a live-action laboratory for a completely different ideology, one that's trying to slam the brakes on decades of decline with some really aggressive policies. And that brings us to the big question, the one everyone is asking. Can you really cure a disease like hyperinflation with a dose of intense, painful, short-term economic medicine? Well, Argentina is betting its entire future that the answer is a resounding yes. To really get what was at stake, you have to wrap your head around this number, 211%. That was the annual inflation rate when President Milei walked into office in December 2023. Imagine that. Your money was losing its value so fast that prices were more than tripling every single year. The economy wasn't just in trouble, it was on fire. Now, a crisis like this doesn't just pop up out of nowhere. This was the boiling point after decades of bad decisions that brought a country with incredible potential right to the edge of the cliff. You know, when you boil it all down, the root of the problem was actually pretty simple. For generation after generation, the government made a habit of spending way more money than it brought in. And its solution? It wasn't to cut back. It was just to fire up the printing presses and create cash out of thin air. And that's where you get this term, the fiscal deficit. Think of it like this. If you keep printing more and more money, the dollars, or in this case pesos, that are already in people's wallets become worth less and less. It's simple supply and demand. You do that for years, and you don't just get inflation, you get hyperinflation. So by the end of 2023, the whole system was flashing red. You had that insane 211% inflation, constant deficits, and the country was basically out of US dollars to pay its bills. On top of that, there was this tangled web of government controls strangling the economy. And as you'd expect, poverty rates were just exploding. So, into this absolute chaos steps President Milei. And he didn't come in promising a gentle, gradual fix. No, he promised a chainsaw to government spending and a scalpel to regulations. It was a prescription for a complete economic overhaul. The game plan had four main pillars. First, the chainsaw, just slash government spending across the board. Second, and this is the most important part, stop the money printer, cold turkey. Third, the scalpel, start surgically removing all the regulations that were killing businesses. And fourth, rip off all the artificial price and currency controls and let the free market actually work. And believe me, he meant it. The chainsaw was real. The number of government ministries was chopped from 18 down to 8. Tens of thousands of public sector jobs were cut. The scalpel, on the other hand, was all about precision. On average, his team was rolling back 2 regulations every single day, trying to clear the path for businesses to compete and grow. So the very first test was to stop the bleeding in the government's own bank account. And the results? Well, they came way faster than anyone, including his critics, thought possible. Just let that sink in. For the first time in over 10 years, the government of Argentina is actually bringing in more money than it's spending. This isn't just a minor detail. It's the absolute foundation for fixing the entire economy. You have to kill the deficit to kill inflation. And these aren't just projections. The numbers are real. In the first 7 months of 2025, Argentina achieved a primary surplus. That's revenue minus spending before interest payments of over 9 trillion pesos. And even after paying interest on its debt, it still had a financial surplus. It's one of the most dramatic fiscal turnarounds we've ever seen. Okay, balancing the government's checkbook is one thing, but what does all of this mean for the 46 million people living there? Well, let's look at the data, because it tells a powerful story of a comeback in the making. This is the big one. This is the metric that matters most to families trying to buy groceries. From that catastrophic peak of 211%, year-over-year inflation has plummeted. By July of 2025, it was down to 36.6%.
That is a massive drop, and it's providing the first real relief that Argentinians have felt in years.
Now, of course, this kind of shock treatment isn't painless. It triggered a harsh but necessary recession. But look what's just around the corner. The World Bank is now forecasting that Argentina's economy will roar back with 5.5% GDP growth in 2025. That signals a really powerful V-shaped recovery. And here's a result that really hits home and shows the human impact of the stabilization. After years of rising poverty, the trend has dramatically reversed. According to UNICEF data, child poverty saw an incredible 14-point drop in just the second half of 2024 alone. That means millions of children are already in a better situation.
Here's how the Cato Institute summed it up. They said Milei's policies are doing more than just fixing the numbers. They're cutting costs, increasing economic freedom, reducing opportunities for corruption, and fundamentally overturning a system that had failed its people for decades.
And this is a big but. The whole thing is still on a knife's edge. The single biggest risk is political. Milei's party doesn't have a majority in Congress, so every single reform is a massive fight. The public has had to endure a lot of pain, and the question is whether the recovery can happen fast enough to keep their support against some very powerful entrenched interests.
So why should someone in the US or Europe or anywhere else care about Argentina's economy? Because this isn't just a local story. It's a high-stakes test case with huge lessons for any country dealing with debt and inflation. The whole world is watching because Argentina is proving something in real time, that it's possible to take a country drowning in debt and inflation and turn it around with aggressive, decisive free market policies. It's a test of an economic philosophy, and the results are coming in fast.
So what are the big lessons so far? First, you can balance a budget way faster than the experts tell you. Second, cutting red tape actually works to lower prices for people. Third, and most importantly, if you want to kill hyperinflation, you have to stop printing money to pay the bills. And fourth, none of it matters without a leader with the political courage to see it through.
Which leaves us with the ultimate question. Is what we are witnessing in Argentina a unique miracle born out of a desperate crisis? Or is it a repeatable blueprint that other nations struggling with debt could follow? The answer to that question is going to shape economic debates for the next decade.